If I could have your attention, please. We're ready to get started. Thank you all for being here today. This is the Governmental Affairs Full Committee meeting. We have a few ideas going on and a few issues to cover today, so I'm looking forward to hearing from all our presenters. And before we get started, could I please ask Chairman Lumpson if you would lead us in prayer?
Okay, if you would please join me. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your goodness to us, for watching over us and caring for us. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity that you've given to us to be here, the responsibility that you've given to each of us here to serve the people of the great state of Georgia. We just ask that we would have your wisdom and your insight, that you would grant it to us, that we would do things in accordance with that which is good for the people of Georgia and in accordance with your will. For we pray it in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Thank you. We have several presenters today, so I do want to get started. Again, welcome everyone. I'd like to take a moment and let's go around the committee and just introduce ourselves, and so we know who everyone is that's here. Let's see, where would we start? Barry, would you like to start?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Barry Fleming. I represent the 121st Legislative District, which is Columbia County and McDuffie County over in East Georgia.
Thank you.
Eddie Lumsden. I represent the 12th District, parts of Floyd and all of Chattooga County in northwest Georgia.
Micah Gravely. I represent House District 67. It's West Douglas County and South Paulding County, West Georgia.
Joseph Gullett, representing House District 19, that's East and North Paulding County.
Thank you.
Victor Anderson, I represent District 10, that's most of Habersham and most of White counties in northeast Georgia.
And I'm Darlene Taylor. I represent District 173 in southwest Georgia.
Hello, I am State Representative Rhonda Bernot, District 77 in Clayton County.
I'm Representative Shannon, House District 84, which is in the Decatur area, all of DeKalb County.
I'm Alan Powell. I represent Hart Franklin in Madison County, the 32nd District in northeast Georgia.
I'm Representative B. Lynn. I represent District 89, which is Atlanta and unincorporated DeKalb.
I'm Mary Margaret Oliver from Middle DeKalb County. I represent parts of Decatur, Brookhaven, Chamblee, and Atlanta, and unincorporated DeKalb.
I'm Rob Leverett. I'm from northeast Georgia. I represent District 33, which includes all of Elbert and Lincoln County and parts of Madison, Wilkes, and Columbia County.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Shay Roberts. I represent House District 52, which is fully encompassed in Fulton County and includes parts of the city of Atlanta and Sandy Springs.
Good morning, Representative Stephen Saines. I represent the majority of Camden County and portions of Ware and Charlton.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone sharing and identifying themselves. Oh, we have another one. Sorry, what's your number, Bruce?
I'm Bruce Williamson. I represent Walton County.
There we go. I appreciate everyone being here today. We have a number of items to cover today. We are going to start right now with an overview from our Legislative Council to talk about an overview of the committee and our responsibilities.
So this committee primarily oversees legislation which deals with the operation management of state and local governments. So in particular, it's going to be legislation dealing with Title 50 of the state code, dealing with state government, Title 45, which deals with public officers and employees, and Title 36, which is local government. And that can lead to a kind of a broad range of stuff. On the state government side, you've got bills that only deal with the state, or laws that only deal with the state government. On the procurement side, would be an example of that. You've also got bills that deal with official state symbols that tend to come to this committee, such as the flag, monuments, sometimes state holidays. Then you've got bills that deal with laws that govern both state and local governments equally, such as the Open Records Act and the Open Meetings Act. Then you've got bills that just are general bills that affect all cities and counties that are kind of equally situated. So that'd be kind of like the zoning procedure law, state laws governing annexation, and then other, bills dealing with the governance of other types of local authorities, such as your downtown development authorities, your regular development authorities. And there are also laws that deal with, the budgeting and auditing requirements that all local governments need to follow, the bonding capacities of local governments, public works bidding. In earlier bienniums, this committee has also handled election law. And also, historically, this committee has handled two different types of local laws. And a local law differentiates from a general law in that it's a bill that affects only a particular city or county local government authority, instead of applying to all governments across the state. And the two types of bills that have historically come to this committee are Cityhood bills, which is a bill incorporating a new city, and also a handful of times bills have been proposed revoking a city charter. Those have also come to this committee. It's kind of the mirror version of the Cityhood bill, where you would disincorporate a city and that territory would then become unincorporated territory once the charter is revoked. And that's kind of a broad general overview of the types of bills this committee gets. If it's if it's dealing with the administration of state or local government, it's probably coming here. Substantive laws would go to more applicable, committees.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. We had a number of inquiries about the type of bills and what type of legislation goes through our committee, so I appreciate that summary of what we do. Next on the agenda, I will recognize Representative Sands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like at the appropriate time to put to the committee's attention the proposed committee rules change, which deals specifically with allowing the committee to view to allow other universities within our system to do the reports for Cityhood, the feasibility studies. We have a great land grant university, but we also have great universities throughout this state who might, for particular cases, have better ability to the infrastructure to look at this.
Thank you. We had a number of people come to the chair with issues concerning a number of items on our rules that needed to be reviewed, and one of them was our legislative council and a number of members of this committee and from higher ed and a couple others. But I'd like to go over now those changes. Everyone, I believe, has a copy, and the first one will be in paragraph 3, the second paragraph. And at the very end of that paragraph, we will be adding amendments to ensure compliance with state and federal voting laws or to resolve interjurisdictional matters may be considered by the committee. This is already part of the jurisdiction of this committee, but it was not listed. And this was something Legislative Council thought we needed to be including. Let's see, if we go down to paragraph 4. If you go to the beginning of the third line, take out the "or," where it says, any bill or resolution to be considered must have a comprehensive feasibility study, which shall be conducted by either the Carl Vinson Institute of Government or the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies. We are adding, or at the discretion of the chair, a public institution with the University System of Georgia. Then it will continue with what was already listed. Regarding such municipality, using the boundaries set forth in the bill or resolution, such study must, and we are taking out, requested from either the Carl Vinson Institute of Government or the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies prior to the end of this session. The bill or the resolution is first introduced and must be received by the committee or the chair by 60 days before the beginning of the next legislative session. Then it adds, in the event of an unresolved conflict of interest, a private entity may be provide such study at the discretion of the chair. This is where we had actually received I'll say inquiry as to why some of our other higher educations were, schools were not allowed to participate in this. So that's why this is included. The next change goes down, let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, the fourth line is totally been removed, and it said, no incorporation that contains a provision or provisions that would limit the full exercise of municipal powers by the proposed municipality, commonly referred to as a city light, shall be considered by this committee. There is no statute addressing anything called city light. We felt that needed to be removed. It was not in statute, and so it needed to be removed. The next paragraph, any other government that may be affected by the proposed incorporation may be permitted to submit to the chair impact studies on the effects of a proposed incorporation on such government or other governments. Such impact studies shall be prepared by either the Carl Vinson Institute, the Andrew Young School of Policy, or, and it is added, at the discretion of the chair, a public institution affiliated with the University System of Georgia. The removal right now of the Georgia Tech Enterprise Innovation Institute asked to be removed. At the expense and direction of such affected government, and shall not be required to be included in the original feasibility study. And then we removed prepared by the Carl Vinson Institute or the Andrew Young School of Policy. Again, that is opening it up to other universities to be able to supply that information. And that is all the changes that were made. Okay, we have a question. Please go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last sentence of the first page, in the event of an unresolvable conflict of interest, a private entity may provide such study at the discretion of the chair. I'm speculating in my mind about what would be a conflict of interest, and I'm trying to figure out some examples of that and I'm struggling.
Okay, which line is that on the first page?
The very last sentence that begins, in the event of an unresolvable conflict of interest, a private entity may provide such study at the discretion of the chair. A private entity could be a non-university consulting firm, perhaps, but
it is possible. That is a possibility. That is not the choice, but if you have someone that is recognized in this field and would like to bring forward information, that would be something that the chair would take under consideration.
But it is it's contingent upon the showing of an unresolvable conflict. So I'm trying to figure out how that'll actually work. If City X wants to use a consulting firm, who decides and proposes a conflict of some kind, that means that there's a conflict with every university in the state?
It could be. The ones that had been on the list had all declined to participate and do the feasibility. And this is just a safety valve if something to that effect should happen. There are other incidences, but that is the main thing. If there was for some reason, and again, conflict of interest, if you do a lot of business with the state, you may have a conflict of interest. You may not do that particular type of service, and it is to leave nothing out there open where there isn't a place for someone to go.
But you're suggesting that a private entity consulting firm could be substituted for one of the university studies?
If there is a conflict, it does qualify that there has got to be some unsolvable conflict. Otherwise, it would not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions, and I want to piggyback off of what Representative Oliver was bringing up. So are there any restrictions around what private entity can be used? Because I think one of the concerns is if a group is hiring a private entity, how are we assured that they're going to present an unbiased report?
That will be determined when the report is done, but they should have the opportunity. And as responsible, the chair will have to determine if that is a company or an entity that has the ability to provide that. It may be, I don't know who it would be, but it would have to be proven that they have the ability and history of being able to do that.
And would they be required to disclose any kind of interest they might have in terms of whether or not they would want to create a city? Because there are potential for lobbying firms or folks who are involved in cityhood movements. There are financial interests that could complicate.
My thought it would be someone more in the development of governments, maybe CPA firms, things like that. We're not looking for lobbyists. That would not be something this chair would approve.
Would we be able to clarify that language so that it's in writing?
I will look and see how it would fit in. I didn't want to name a particular because I don't know. It may not be a CPA, and it may not, I'm not sure who it would be. There are companies that do this type of work. So I will think about that. Let me think while we are answering questions.
And then I have a couple more questions. One is, if we pass these rules today, do they apply for everything moving forward, or is it retroactive?
It applies to anything done in this committee effective today. When these are approved, they're going to apply.
So it would apply to anything that was active or potentially active last legislative session?
That's correct. Anything that, even if it is, quote, in the works, these would be acceptable. It's anybody that's in the process right now. This would be acceptable.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Number 14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar concern. I like the other changes that are in the rules, but with this, the amount of heartburn that we've seen over the years with folks getting a city and then not liking the way it goes and they want to get rid of it, and so much back and forth, not having any qualifications, and this just kind of being so loose and not really stated about what kind of private entity could do the study. I just really feel like this needs to be tightened up because of the amount of heartburn that we've seen. I really wish that this would say another public entity, because I think when you open up private, I mean, you can walk into a situation where entities have been created just to do a specific thing.
No, it is not. It is open to many. What would happen if somebody in Savannah wanted to use a firm out of North Carolina? Would you say they should be allowed? It's another entity. It's not a Georgia State public institution. That may be something that would be under consideration.
Well, I guess that's my concern, is that you're saying, what would I say? But the rules say it's whatever the chair says, which I think for good governance just should be more streamlined as to who could complete the study. That's really my issue with this and some of the other things, is it just goes back to the discretion of the chair. Not that I think that you would have bad discretion, but it just feels like for better governance, it should be some, you know, just spelled out a little more what kind of private entity would be considered a qualified entity to be able to do these studies, especially if cities are going to come up and say, well, I want this private entity to do it. They need some guidelines around who they can get to do this if there is a conflict.
I appreciate your input, and I will take it under consideration.
Thank you.
Representative Sands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The way I read it, and just for clarification, where it states an unresolved, and going back to my colleague's concerns on the unresolvable conflict of interest a private entity may provide such study, the way I understand it, it says it is not what the committee is looking for as a first act from a proposed city. It would be intentionally all-inclusive ability for there to be discretion for the committee to view a different study if there were no available public entities with the discretion. So I'd feel more comfortable leaving it open, knowing that the study is going to go before each committee member to make that determination when it goes through the process. It's not the final act, but a pre-act for consideration.
Thank you. Representative Roberts.
My concerns are aligned with Representative Oliver and Shannon, and when could it be a public university at least, where we know it's an a private university setting instead of?
That is a possibility. I will tell you, there could have been a that a private university may want to do it. It could be a firm that works with cities and counties. We're not looking at lobbyists. We're looking at someone with credibility, I guess you would say, a CPA, perhaps a private institution that does it. But keep in mind, this only applies if there is a conflict that cannot be resolved. This is not go shopping for someone. This is if it cannot be resolved.
I guess our heartburn is just over the fact that there's no clarification that it has to be a non-lobbyist. So if there was some way to clarify that it was in the language, because that's what...
I would hope that anybody that sits in this chair would not use a lobbyist, and I feel comfortable that they would not. Thank you. Let's see. Representative Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is similar about the vagueness of this entity, and I understand what you're saying about after an unresolvable conflict. It's just that it seems like when it comes to these new cities, there's often an unresolvable conflict. And my question is, would such an entity, would NCSL or ALEC be considered an eligible entity under this language?
I would take that under consideration if they submitted. I'm not saying it would be accepted. Their criteria would be looking at the entity, who it is, and whether they would be accepted.
Thank you.
Representative Wynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we plan on bringing any legislation up during special session when we reconvene as it pertains to cityhood?
I have not been approached by any.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chairman Fleming.
I move we approve the rules.
Do we have a second? Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, moving on to our next issue. We have Rob Gordon. He is the director of the Carl Vinson Institute, and we're very happy to have you with us today. If you would come forward and share some great things about our state and what our cities and counties do. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It is an absolute honor to be able to speak with you today and bring greetings on behalf of the Carl Vinson Institute of Government and the University of Georgia. I really appreciate the invitation to come and introduce myself to the committee and talk a little bit about the work that we are doing at the Institute of Government. As the chair said, my name is Rob Gordon, and just this past January, I was appointed as the director of the Institute of Government. I previously served as director of UGA's Archway Partnership, one of our fellow public service and outreach units, since 2015. And prior to that, actually joined the Institute of Government in 2010, where I managed our economic development programs, the applied demography program, and our fiscal analysis work. So coming back to the Institute of Government is, quite frankly, just a bit of a homecoming for me. I also recognize that I'm following in the immediate past footsteps of our friend and colleague, Dr. Laura Meadows, who is blissfully enjoying her retirement, other than when I call and bother her on her cell phone. Laura is certainly hard to replace, but I want you all to know that certainly for me, I take this role incredibly seriously, our mission very seriously, and appreciate the opportunity to help support the work of our governments across the state of Georgia and the work of you as members of the Georgia General Assembly. As director of the Institute of Government, I have the honor of serving alongside a team of experts who inform, inspire, and innovate so that governments large and small can be more efficient and responsive to their citizens, address current and emerging challenges, and serve the public with excellence. We are committed to promoting excellence in government through technical assistance, training programs, applied research, and technology solutions. And in doing so, we have the opportunity to work extensively with government leaders across Georgia to develop the knowledge and skills that elected officials, professional staff, and appointed board members need to manage effectively in the 21st century. Our core role in all of the services that we provide is to be a trusted partner and resource source that governments can turn to for the highest quality educational programming and data-driven research and technical assistance, all of which is designed to inform decision-making as those government leaders themselves determine how to best deliver services to the citizens they represent. I know that you are all already familiar with much of our work, but in just a few minutes, I just wanted to talk generally about the Institute of Government and give you a couple of examples of how we do our work. So I break our work down into three buckets. One is technology solutions, two is training and educational programming, and three is technical assistance and applied research. So starting with technology solution, this work really involves assisting government entities in improving program efficiencies through the use of technology. So examples of this work include data utilization and visualization, a lot of back-end work to really make dashboards and websites work. Examples of this would be the tax and expenditure database that you are all familiar with, our website, georgiadata.org, that really gathers and provides all the information and data that has been for years included in the Georgia County Guide. This work also involves application and website design. We provide cybersecurity assessments and recommendations for communities, and our GIS data development. One of our most visible projects recently here has been our work on the state's Broadband Map, really informing the development of broadband infrastructure all across the state by really reaching in to, on a granular level, to understand served and unserved areas across the state of Georgia. A second area of our work is training and educational programming. So over 10,000 people attend training classes conducted by the Institute of Government each year. Many of those training programs are conducted with our great partners, ACCG and GMA and others, but many others we conduct on our own, solely by the Institute of Government, and examples of these would be in financial management, our Certified Public Manager program, we have a Certified Economic Development Professionals program, and of course, Development Authority training. We also do customized training and facilitated retreats for state agencies and local governments. And of course, this includes training programs, where we also have training programs for the General Assembly, for example, hosting the Biennial Institute. We also hosted our recently completed Georgia Legislative Leadership Institute for select freshman legislators, several of whom in this room were joining us for that, and the publication of the Handbook for Georgia Legislators. Our third area we call technical assistance and applied research, and here we really have specific customized projects. For example, we help numerous state agencies with survey research and evaluation, which is obviously a critical component to those agencies who receive federal program dollars for their services and for other reasons. We work with local governments across the state on various different governance issues. The list is very expansive. But examples of this work include data analytics and strategy development to support workforce development needs, economic impact and analysis, demographic analysis, community-based downtown redevelopment planning, and community-wide branding efforts that support tourism and economic development. So I know that's a lot of information. It's also just a high-level overview, but bottom line, I personally am kind of a government nerd, so for us at the Institute of Government, if it involves government and it's related to government and its public entities across the state of Georgia, we're here to partner and assist. And as I stated before, really our goal in all of that is to be trusted, objective resource for the highest quality, relevant, data-driven, useful information designed to inform decision-making of our government officials. So thank you very much for the time and for inviting me here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Oliver?
Welcome back. Thank you very much. CVI is very respected in relation to their feasibility studies. Mr. Beckett has been kind of the front person for all activity in DeKalb County, but he once told me that that they didn't have time to do a feasibility study. Do you have time to do everybody that's asking you for feasibility studies?
And we really simply do not. We generally, I mean, we would, certainly we're available to help. We generally take those on as a first come, first served basis. And once our capacity is engaged, we really don't have time to take on more.
Have you talked with other public institutions? Because I think Georgia Tech has decided they don't want to do it. Is Georgia State still willing to do it? What's our availability in our public institutions? Because we really should be, as we did, talk about expanding the opportunity for public institutions to do this in the system of Georgia.
Well, I would hesitate to really speak for one of our other public institutions. I certainly can tell you from our standpoint, we have limited capacity at this point to take on those studies. They are very time-consuming, technical, and takes a lot of expertise. And so, that's been our limitation, certainly.
Are you at liberty to tell me whether or not you have been retained to provide a feasibility study for the proposed city of Beckett?
We have not been retained to provide that.
Have you told them you don't have time?
Yes, ma'am. We told them we did not have time.
And they're seeking a private institution to do that?
I think you'd have to ask. I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Representative Maynard, did you have a question?
I found my answer.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? I'd like to take this, okay. Please.
We appreciate you coming today, and I just think just a matter of interest for a lot of the younger members of this body, can you tell us who Carl Vinson was?
Sure. Congressman Carl Vinson was the longest-serving member of the Congress. He is often referred to as the father of the two-ocean Navy because he advocated for the support of the Navy in both theaters. Obviously, it's an honor to have his name attached to our institute.
That was my recollection as well as in the history books I've read. He's credited with having the United States of America prepared and the ships in process being prepared to fight World War II. If absent his leadership, it could have been a drastically more American lives lost in that conflict. Is that not true?
I believe that's true, certainly. Thank you, Representative.
Chairman Fleming.
Madam Chair, since Representative Williamson's got us playing trivia, I was going to ask Mr. Gordon if he could tell us who Carl Vinson's favorite nephew was.
Do you know the answer?
This guy named Sam Nunn.
Yes.
That's how he became chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, because his uncle was chairman of the House Armed Services Committee for a number of years. So the story goes.
Right.
Thank you for sharing. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the many programs that your institution brings to the communities. I represent rural community, and several have had access to and received great assistance through the pathways, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for these communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is Ted Beckett. Are you?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ted Baggett. I'm one of the associate directors at the Institute. I have the pleasure of working with our director, Rob Gordon. And I was asked to kind of give an overview of municipal incorporation. And I've done this before for the committee a couple of years ago. A lot of membership has changed. A lot of the incorporation rules haven't, though. And Mrs. Ease, in conveying the invitation, was very clear that I had 3 hours and not a minute over. So if I talk really fast, I think I can keep to that. Let me just pull up. I think you should have printed in your folders a copy of this. It just kind of helps keep me on track. So Georgia is a little bit of an anomaly. We're one of only 7 states that require legislative enactment to create a city. There are a lot of different ways to go about incorporation across the country. And in Georgia, they only have to meet the minimum statutory criteria that we have imposed for incorporation. And of course, as we've discussed, those cityhood bills have come to this committee in the House and slow go in the Senate. Some of the other methods I think are interesting just to kind of note. 34 different states have a petition process that collects petitions from registered voters within the area being considered for incorporation. 12 states allow you to petition a court to call for a referendum. There are 15 states where the approval of the county in which the area is located must be obtained. Georgia, of course, is unique also in the sense that our cities and counties possess a lot of the same local government powers to provide the same services, often to the same people, and using very often the same revenue sources. So I'm not sure that method fits very well with Georgia. And then, as an interesting note, there are 6 different states where there is a boundary commission or state agency that determines whether or not a referendum for a city or the creation of a city can go forward. So there are a variety of different ways. In fact, I was talking with someone earlier, decades ago in Georgia, a superior court could create a city in Georgia. It was often done for little mill towns. Bibb City and Payne City are cities that no longer exist. Their charters have been revoked, but were originally created by superior courts, which were doing that to give a method of organizing for the mill workers in that particular textile town. So here in our state, where it's totally legislative driven, there's statutes that create and impose the minimum standards. And those haven't changed in decades, frankly. Minimum residential population of 200 people, density of 200 persons per square mile, at least 60% of the total numbers of parcels have to be used for purposes essentially other than agriculture. And they have to be subdivided such that at least 60% of the area contains parcels of 5 acres or less, so some level of density there. All of the recent legislation, the last 15 years of what I call the modern cityhood movement, which began with Sandy Springs, all of those bills have called for referenda to be held in the area being considered for incorporation. We've been talking just now about the rules, so I think you're very familiar with that. The feasibility studies. So we, along with Georgia State, have been doing these, the lion's share of them. Some of the mechanics of how this works, the message we've gotten from this committee and other members and leadership of the General Assembly is that these studies should not be paid for with state funds, that the groups wishing to incorporate should raise this money privately and engage us to pay for the study. So essentially what that means is that they need to go and create a nonprofit that can then contract with the Board of Regents and engage us via that mechanism. We have said, for clarification purposes and to make sure we have guidance, because our wheelhouse is the government, as our director just said. And so we want to make sure there's a connection there to the government, and in this case it's the legislature who drives cityhood. And so we have said we like to get a written letter or written request from a legislator representing the area, or perhaps at least the chair of one of these committees where the bill goes, asking us to engage with this group and do the study. I'm proud to say that we have lots of local governments and state government agencies that use our services, and so to put a private group in that wheel, we really feel needs that connection to the government. We have insisted that part of our maintaining our objectivity is having control over the methodology. So we have final say over which cities are used as comparisons, how we're going to tabulate, calculate, and come up with the estimates that form the basis of a conclusion about whether or not one of these proposals is fiscally feasible. And in doing so, also, we make it very clear we don't take a position for or against a proposed city. There's, as I'll mention again, there's a variety of factors that go into that. All we're trying to do is do an objective fiscal analysis on whether or not the city makes financial sense. So what exactly does that mean when you talk about whether or not a city makes financial sense in the context of these studies? It's not a proposed budget. It's an estimation, if you will, of whether or not revenue currently being collected to provide the services that the proposed city hopes to provide is adequate to fund them. And so I look at this really as being part of two main questions. What does it cost for a city of the size and geography to provide the services identified by those that are commissioning it? And what are the revenues that are available to a proposed city in the area under consideration for incorporation? So the groups will basically identify the services that they want to provide. In order to kind of provide some rubric of guidance for that, what we've insisted is you've got to at least have 3 from what we call the active, some people call it the inactive municipality statute. So the statute cited here in the materials is a statute that has been around for quite a while. It sets up the basic minimums for a city to maintain its charter, and that is holding regular meetings, holding elections, and providing 3 of the services from this list, either directly or by contract. And so that has been, the guidance we've said is, look, you've got to at least pick enough services to provide that you would meet the criteria in this statute. And I think, it's worth mentioning that there is another statute that tolls this requirement of activity for 2 years. And there's a statute that allows for the bills that create the city to create transition governments, boards that help guide it to the period of time between incorporation and when the first set of elected officials is sworn in. So there are some statutes that accommodate this, but generally speaking, we felt like tying it to this requirement made sense going forward in terms of service identification. So how do we go about determining some of the expenditures? What we've done is looked at peer cities and examined their financial statements, reviewed their audits, their budgets, interviewed their financial people. We've identified those peer cities, by whether or not they were in the metro Atlanta area. For purposes of thinking about costs, we look at population, we look at geographic compactness, and we look at, sort of the relative wealth and health of the tax data, the tax base. Once you've identified sort of what those costs are that are related to the services the proposed city wants to provide, we make sure it doesn't include things that are not properly included in that particular services budget that are just sort of hidden costs. We make sure to calculate what we call the indirect costs, what are the administrative services these departments get. And then you look at the capital costs. And sometimes we have to kind of look beyond those comparison cities and look at a group of cities because capital expenditures tend to ebb and flow with the availability of resources, things like SPLOST and other grant funds. So we sometimes take a wider snapshot to estimate the capital that's necessary to provide the services identified. To determine revenues, a lot of that data comes from the county that's currently providing services to these areas. There are funds in Georgia, and I colloquially call them the either-or funds. They are things that local governments collect that if it's in the unincorporated area, the county government will collect it. Things like the bank shares tax, the insurance premiums tax. If they're regulating alcoholic beverage sales, they'll collect those taxes and fees. If there's a city, the city will collect those revenues. And so you attribute them appropriately in this methodology. We try to identify if some of those are restricted purpose taxes, like hotel motel taxes. And then there are revenues that are uniquely available to cities. Only cities in Georgia can collect franchise fees off electricity, gas, and landline phone. And so we have used, regression analysis using lots of data from lots of cities to try to project what we think those franchise fees will be for the proposed city. And so if ends meet needs, so to speak, if the revenue that's currently being provided meets the needs, then we have deemed it to be likely to be fiscally feasible. If there's a giant shortfall that would require significant increases in taxation or would lead us to question the quality of the service that might be provided, then we have deemed it not feasible. And again, that finding is not intended to be an endorsement. I do have colleagues who have said, well, if you pay enough taxes, anything is feasible. But in order to come up with some kind of workable definition, we have tried to kind of use the guideline that, governments are not profit-generating centers. They provide services. And so if it's a break-even equation based generally on what revenues are being collected for that service now, we've deemed it feasible is how we've gone in that route. There was, one instance where it was a giant shortfall, and so we just told them they weren't feasible. And they kind of went back to the drawing board and redid their whole plan. But that's really where that definition comes in and what we're really trying to say, and we're trying to show the people who are organizing the effort and the public, and you all. So there's a couple of final observations. Incorporation is a political process. And being vested in the General Assembly, y'all can choose how you want to go forward. What the process will be for incorporation bills. All these recent bills have imposed referenda requirement. I don't think this legislature is bound by that. I think you could simply impose a city by fiat if you so chose. And you can choose what rules and how to apply them. So a few other notes and things that just kind of don't fall into any neat category. The office here of congressional legislative reapportionment is invaluable, and one of the little sort of data nerd details that people don't always get is that cities like to draw boundaries on things like railroad tracks and rivers and lots of other interesting boundaries, but if you don't draw it on whole census blocks, you can't get an accurate measure of the population that's wholly contained. And so just as when you're drawing legislative districts, in order to hold valid elections in these cities, which will often be conducted by county officials on behalf of the city through contract, a lot of the groups have to gain access to Legislative Office of Congressional Reapportionment to gain access to that GIS data that has whole census blocks to draw their maps. I mentioned the transition period, and those election dates have been set at different times for the first set of elected officials. These incorporation bills also typically contain the form of government for the charter, whether that's strong mayor, manager, form of government, or what have you, whether that mayor has the veto power. A lot of those details are going to be in that incorporation bill. And as I've said, political process, the fiscal feasibility study is just one element of all that. Whether or not a city makes sense, to the members of this body, this committee, the legislators from the area, the general public. There's just a whole host of other factors, I think, that go into figuring that out. And so just want to try to put in perspective that the fiscal feasibility is just sort of one stick in the Jenga. And those are sort of my thoughts, but if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? There you go. Representative Maynard?
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. The first one is, if a legislator does this written request for the area under consideration to make it a municipality, right now we have county and city delegations, but if a legislator does this written request, but they're not actually a part of the city. So for example, in Fulton County, let me just give an example about the most current thing that's happening. So let's say representative from Johns Creek says, hey, we want to make Buckhead a city, but Johns Creek is not in Buckhead. Can that written request come from them since they're not actually in Buckhead?
Well, there's, the committee rules, and then there's the rules that I like to have on our process at the Institute. What I have asked for these years, and I've never encountered the problem yet that you're talking about, we've asked that it be a legislator from the area and or at least the committee chair from the committee where the bills went. I haven't had to deal with a request yet from a legislator that didn't represent the area in question. So I guess if we came to that road, I would be tested, and it would not ultimately be up to me. I'm sure it would be up to leadership in the General Assembly as well as at the university system of whether my ask was honored or not. But there's nothing in rule. That's just been a guiding rule I've tried to use.
Okay. And Legislator Mary Margaret Oliver, her point, which I thought was really good, if our university systems are not able to do these feasibility studies because of time, and I'm just bringing this up because I see Mr. Bayal is here with the Atlanta Regional Commission, can you guys partner with someone like the Atlanta Regional Commission to do these studies since they are so data-driven?
A lot of the data that we need is housed pretty granularly in existing city and county governments. So I wouldn't imagine ARC would have the budget data for comparison cities or the detailed expenditures or revenues of the county government that we were looking at.
And so the public universities, they don't have that information readily either, right? They get it from somewhere.
We have some in the TED data center, the Tax and Expenditure Data Center, where budget and financial documents are uploaded to our website, and where we contain what's reported to the Department of Community Affairs in the annual report of local government finance. But, I mean, really there's no substitute we found for reaching out directly to the city and the department that we're getting data from and interviewing the finance people there.
Okay, and then just for clarity, when you say methodology, that means that is the process. So as long as you oversee the process, your methodology that you set out, technically anybody can do it as long as you're overseeing the methodology.
Whether or not we would engage in that, it would be a question you'd have to ask my director or someone else. But
okay, and just two more other questions. The other one is, I'm using your word, it's the insistence that at least 3 services be used. And the thought is when I see this list of the other services, they're basic services that constituents need. And so within the feasibility study, does it say that if the city does only these 3 basic minimum services, they'll still have to get these other services because they're basics, right, from another city or county, and how all of that impacts the other city or county in regards to expenditures and revenue?
we don't talk about the impact to the other governments, and that's part of, I mean, I think the rules that y'all were just debating talk about, the ability of the impacted governments to submit another study that does that. We've actually done some of that work. We've done the impact work for DeKalb County. In 2019, we did that. We did it for the city of Stockbridge back when the city of Eagles Landing was proposed. So that's a whole nother study in a sense. And we don't say that you have to expand to the other services, but it is noted that you'll be continuing to receive other services from the other governments. That list from which we required 3 is chosen because that's the active municipality statute, because that establishes the bare minimum that you have to do in order to continue to exist. And
Okay.
so that is clearly noted.
Thank you.
I would like to share for your information that according to our committee rules, the legislator can bring a bill if they reside in the county from which this city is being developed. That's in the rules already. It's been in there. And the regional commission, I don't think that's within the scope of their business and practice, and whether they would have the resources to be able to do that. It would be something, I guess someone could bring it, but I don't know that they have the abilities and the resources like the university would have. And I don't know that the university would want to depend on somebody else's work. I'm just, don't mean to interfere there, but I do think that that's not the purpose of the regional commission. Thank you. Representative Nguyen, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned early on in your report that other states have different methodology for being able to create cities. And I think one of the challenges, if we're looking at this slide, the role of the General Assembly, the first line is, it's important to remember that ultimately incorporation is a political process in our state. And some of the challenges we've faced in the past are, for example, there was a senator who dropped a general bill to create a city a couple years ago, and he didn't represent any part of that county. It was a DeKalb County City of Greenhaven bill. And so do you have any recommendations on how we can make this a better process that really centers both the residents who live there as well as the surrounding counties, and not try to avoid as much as possible, creating, ways for somebody to just go in politically to do something that really has nothing to do with their district at all?
Well, in a short word, no. I don't. And to be fair, I'm sure it's a political process in these other states too. It's just a different political process. you know, legislative bodies, I think, understandably are reluctant to delegate power. But I've also spoken candidly with some of the legislators who carried these bills who would have loved there to have been a different process where there was petitions to somebody else to bring it forward. You know, at the end of the day, I think it's just a matter of picking what individual rule makers think is the lesser evils. I don't know that any one of these processes is necessarily less or better politics than another one.
With the states that have, I think you mentioned like a independent board, that has that been more successful? And
I don't know how to measure the success. I will say we have created a lot more cities than most of the other states in the last 15 years.
Yeah, and then one more question. So with the other states that do citihoods, I mean, one thing that's interesting to me, and I actually remember the city of Sharon Springs going through committee a couple years ago, and one of our lawmakers proposed that the referendum be above a 50% threshold for voters, and I think it was a unanimous decision to do that, but it hasn't been applied for every cityhood bill. In other states, when they have referendums, is it a 50%, or do they have the ability to change that and increase the threshold, or is it just different all across the board?
I don't know the answer to your question. It's a good one. I'd have to go look and see what those thresholds are. But you did remind me to point out that I provided in everyone's packet the sort of the breakdown of how these referendum came out in the different cities that we've proposed. And as you correctly note, Sharon Springs was the one example where that threshold was raised above a simple majority. And very interestingly, it passed, but didn't pass because it didn't have enough of a majority under the terms of the bill. But I could try to find out, but I don't know right now.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ted, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
And this may be a question you do not know the answer to, but I noticed the chart you provided on referenda. Is the referenda conducted among the areas to become incorporated, or does it expand beyond that?
Just in the area proposed for incorporation, and I think there is a case from one of the circuit courts out west that says that found that was the only way to do it. I could try to find that for you, but there's never been one I'm aware of that was anything but the boundaries of the proposed
so
city.
that's at least that's the custom, and arguably maybe illegally mandated, but the percentage required for approval can apparently be changed beyond a simple majority.
Apparently so.
Thank you.
Representative Sands.
Thank you for the briefing. When it comes to, I know you've noted that you do not have the capacity at the time to do all the requests you're getting. Is there something in the process that makes it more encumbering on the institution? I understand the Enterprise Innovation Institute isn't conducting them, so is there? I don't want to ask you putting them in their shoes on why they can't, but what is the largest points of constraints to conducting these studies at this point for y'all?
Not unlike a lot of the work we do, Representative, it's about getting the right data. There just is no one good clearinghouse for all the information we need to feel like we're giving people a really clear and accurate estimate of some of these costs. You know, in essence, what we do in these studies is prove the feasibility by showing you in painful detail how much it costs to run a planning and zoning department that does X, how much it costs to, fix, how often you have to fix these merry-go-rounds at the park, and what the capital costs are with that. That detail really only rests in, the computers, the notes, the brains of the finance people in the comparison cities. You could do a sort of, 36,000 level study and look at aggregated data, the report of local government finance, but then you're just relying on, what somebody at that city put on a form to DCA without really kind of drilling down into the details. So it's data gathering. I tell people when they first start talking to us about this, it takes us about 6 months to do one. I get a PhD to do the regression analysis for us on what the franchise fees are going to generate, and that requires looking at years of data from other cities and trying to formulaically do our very best estimate. And then I want other people to check those numbers. Because the last thing I want to do is publish a report that has an error carried over from an Excel spreadsheet. So just sort of data gathering and being fastidious.
And I appreciate your note on the collection of the data. Are the cities that you've noted as comparable cities, is there a delay or is there restraint? I know it's public information, but how much does that restraint on receiving the data you need from those comparable cities play into the time and capacity?
Getting the data from the comparable cities is time consuming, but not because they're generally unhelpful. Getting the data from the county in which the city is going to be created ranges from, and I'm going back a decade, from outright hostility to generally cooperative. And it just depends on who's in control in that county government at the time and how difficult they want to make the process.
Thank you. And the very last comment, since someone else asked about another city, has there been anyone who's approached you from St. Simons about anything?
This year? This year?
Sure. Recent history.
Well, not within the last year.
Thanks.
Representative Maynard?
Is there any partner that you could see yourself partnering with to help with the data piece to it? To make, you guys be able to actually do the studies?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, someone sort of has to be the primary researcher and take responsibility for it. I mean, we try to make the methodology pretty transparent in the studies that we've done. And it's not rocket science, it's just kind of taking your time and being careful. So, I mean, I think qualified researchers could pick up studies we've done and replicate the methodology. In fact, the way we're doing it now, it's changed a little bit over time, but originally, I believe in 2007 with Georgia State, we came up with a lot of those methodological steps when we were both doing work in Dunwoody. So I think it can be replicated. I think there are other qualified researchers that can do it.
Okay, Representative Roberts, did you have a question? Okay, that's all our questions. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate all your input.
Thank you.
Now, our next speaker is Clint Mueller. He's the Legislative Director of the Association of County Government Commissioners of Georgia.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Clint Mueller. I'm the Legislative Director for the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I appreciate you inviting us here today to speak about counties in general and answer any questions that you all may have. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I believe you have in front of you. Is it on the computer also? Let me see if I can bring it up. Hold on. Here we go. So just a little bit about the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. We do represent all 159 county governments in the state of Georgia. It's voluntary to be a member of our association. I guess if one of the 159 counties wants to pull out, they could. Thankfully, ever since I've been to ACG, which is 24 years, we've never had a county leave our association, but we are a dues-paying organization that works only on behalf of the counties of the state of Georgia. We also have insurance programs that we run for the counties of Georgia. We have retirement plans that we provide the counties of Georgia. We also do consulting services, and we also do training for the county commissioners. We've already talked about the training partnership that we have with the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. That's a formal training program that we run in partnership with the Carl Vinson Institute of Government for the counties of Georgia. But we do a lot of other kinds of informal training. We also do the training for all the newly elected county commissioners as they come into office. So we do quite a number of things for the counties and the county staff. Do want to recognize that we have some of your members that have served at the county level of government, some of them in elected positions, as well as some that are county officials, and you have a wealth of expertise on this committee, and we appreciate that you've got some people that have served at the local level. So I'm just going to talk just real high level about county government in general, and again, stop me and ask any questions as we go along if you have any. So we've got the second most counties next to Texas. I don't think that anybody is clamoring to add more counties, and if you are, you've got to amend the state constitution first because we're capped right now at 159. There has been some, I think, some suggestions in the past that maybe we can get some counties to consolidate to free up a new county in the state. That hasn't happened yet. We have had some success, though, in our state in consolidating county and city governments. So no county-to-county consolidations yet, but we do have some county and city consolidations. You'll see those up there, Augusta, Richmond, Athens, Clark. We've got some small ones, too, like Chattahoochee, Casita, and then Columbus, Muskogee, Eccles, Georgetown, Quitman, Webster, and Macon-Bibb is the most recent. Interesting about Eccles County, they're the only county in the state that did not have a municipality. There was no city within the county boundaries. And you all passed legislation here at the General Assembly that basically allowed them to have a vote on consolidation, even though there was no city to consolidate with. So they are actually a consolidated county government, but they never consolidated with a city to do it. A few county facts. You know, we're the only state that allows sole commissioners. We still have a number of counties that have sole commissioners. They have their own national organization made up of only Georgia members. Athens Clarke County is our smallest county geographically, and Ware County is our largest county geographically. A little bit of county history, the first 8 counties, and we did have some other parishes and other forms of local government prior to counties, but the first 8 counties in Georgia were created back in 1977, and you see those there on the slide. Peach County was the most recent county created. That was back in 1924, so you can see we haven't had any counties created recently. Campbell County and Milton County, which were separate at one time from Fulton County, were annexed into Fulton County back during the Great Depression in 1932, mainly for financial reasons. I know there's been some discussion about whether those counties should recreate themselves, but right now they are still part of Fulton County. And again, I mentioned earlier, we have a constitutional amendment that limits the number of counties to 159. That was passed back in 1945. Another interesting piece of trivia is we used to have what they call a county unit system, which gave the rural counties of the state of Georgia a lot of clout down here at the General Assembly. That county unit system was ruled unconstitutional in 1962. However, ACCG would be glad to talk to anybody that wants to maybe bring that back. No, just kidding. But we do have a lot of rural counties in our state. And some people ask me periodically there, why do we have so many counties? We got 159. Well, I think there's a number of reasons why we have 159. You know, one of the answers was transportation to get to the county courthouse and how long it took to get to the county courthouse. But another reason was political clout down here at the state capitol. And back when we had the county unit system, the more rural counties you had, the more political clout you had down here at the state capitol. So here are based on current census numbers that just recently came out, here's our largest counties in the state of Georgia. You can see Fulton County at over 1 million, Gwinnett County's almost at 1 million, Cobb and DeKalb are approaching 1 million, and then it drops down. Clayton's almost 300,000, and it goes down from there. So we have, 4 counties that are almost approaching or at 1 million people. And then we have small counties. You can see these are the 5 smallest counties in the state of Georgia, the smallest being Tolliver County. Don't pronounce it Taliaferro, it's Tolliver. But it's 1,559 people. You can imagine with having all the infrastructure you have to run a county government and your constitutional officers and everything else, that's like a very expensive HOA up here in Atlanta to govern over 1,559 people. Sources and limits of a power. So counties were constitutionally created entities. We basically serve as the state arm at the local level. We like to tell people that every resident in the state of Georgia lives in a county. There's nobody that lives in our state that does not live in a county. Now, I'm not sure what the current statistics are between those that live in unincorporated areas versus incorporated areas. I know at one time there was more people that lived in unincorporated areas than actually lived in incorporated areas. And then it was about 50-50. I'm not sure what it is today. But the point is, everybody, whether you live inside a city or you live outside a city, you're going to be in a county. We do a lot of county services, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. some of the forms of government that we have, and we have several in the state. The traditional county commission, where basically you have a board and they don't have a full-time manager or administrator. It's the elected officials that oversee the day-to-day operations of the county. Then you've got the sole commissioner, where you have one elected official and only one elected official, and they oversee the daily operations of the county. And then you've got the elected executive, which is separate from the Board of Commissioners. And then you've got the county, the commission administrator form of government and the commission manager form of government. So several iterations of forms of county government in our state. For traditional commissions, we have about 30 of those. For the commission administrator form, 63, commission manager form, 57, 7 sole commissioners left, and 2 elected executives. You can see most counties that typically have a manager or administrator. Size of our county commissions. The typical size, you can see in the middle there, is a 5-member board of commissioners. That's 66.7%. But, you know, we go all the way up to 11 county commissioners. We have constitutional officers at the local level. I know you all have state constitutional officers. At the local level, the 4 local constitutional officers are the sheriff, the clerk of superior court, the judge at the probate court, and the tax commissioner. These are all elected officials and have constitutional responsibilities, but the county government is required to fund their budgets. And then we have other elected officials at the county level. We've got the superior court judges, the district attorneys. These are really state elected officials, but the county helps provide space and helps contribute to their salaries, but they are elected locally at the county level. And we've got state court judges, solicitors, magistrate court judges, coroners, and in a few places, I believe we still have some elected surveyors. We also appoint many members to boards and authorities. These are some of the boards and authorities that county commissioners make appointments to and have some oversight over. Your Board of Tax Assessors, your Board of Equalizations, both of those deal with property taxes. The Boards of Health, Board of Family and Children's Services, your Planning Commission, zoning boards, library boards, development authority boards, hospital, housing, airport. There's a number that aren't even on here, but as you can see, there's lots of other types of boards and authorities that the county appoints members to and has some indirect control over. We provide a lot of mandated services. Your court systems, whether it's probate, superior, juvenile, indigent defense, all of that is provided primarily at the county level with some financial support from the state. Elections, obviously we run the state and county and school board elections. In some cases, we will contract to run the city elections, but in some cases, the cities will run their own elections. But outside the cities, we're basically running the elections for everybody else. Your records and deeds, whether it's land records, vital records, we keep all of those records and deeds. Our sheriff's office provides a lot of state services. We have the jails. Every county, if they don't have their own jail, they have to contract with somebody to house their prisoners. Emergency management, tax commissioners, property assessment. We do tags and titles is another state service that we do at the county level. A lot of things that maybe people don't think about when they think about local government, but things that are very costly that we have to fund at the county level. And then on top of what I'll call the statewide county, or the state mandated services that are countywide in nature, we provide a number of services that may not be provided countywide. And these are cities that are more like what cities, these are services more like what cities provide, right? So, but counties are in a sense acting like a city in a portion of the county. Now, sometimes it may be the whole county, sometimes it's just a portion of the county. A lot of times it's outside a city, but sometimes it, like, take fire, for example. We've got counties that provide fire, say, in the whole unincorporated area of the county, but they also provide fire for certain cities, but not all the cities. So you'll see those up there: fire, garbage, road construction, parks and recreation, stormwater, public housing, transportation, libraries, building codes. Really, these are the types of services. If they're providing these types of services inside a city, they have to have a contract with the city to be providing them. Otherwise, they can really only provide these services out in the unincorporated area of the county. So I'm sure when Ted was talking about some of the difficulties in getting some of this data and all the differences we have across the state, our counties are really different in this area in which ones they provide and where they provide them in the county. Our revenues, primarily the property taxes are #1 revenue source, then sales tax comes in at #2. Then we have a variety of other revenue sources that we use to fund county government, but property taxes and sales taxes probably make up at least 50% or more of our revenues. These are some revenues, and this may be interesting for some of you in the discussion about incorporation. These are some of the revenues that we can only collect outside the cities, or we collect it based on, say, unincorporated population. So if you have an area that incorporates, then these are the types of revenues that would shift over to the new city and would come out of the county's budget. One of the bigger ones is insurance premium tax. So that's a population-based formula. So counties get a share of the insurance premium tax revenue based on their unincorporated population, and they're supposed to spend it on services that have a primary benefit to their unincorporated population. But if there's an annexation or the creation of a new city, the county would lose that share of the population insurance premium tax due to that population, and it would move over to the new city or the annexed area of the new city. Same with hotel motel tax. We can't collect that inside the city unless the city is not collecting it and gives us the authority to collect it there. Otherwise, it's just in the unincorporated area. Occupation taxes, some people call it business licenses, same thing. Cable franchise fees, we can only collect that in the unincorporated area. Alcohol beverages taxes. Then there's also a variety of special tax and fees that are collected by districts. So it may be a fire fee that's collected through a fire district, or an ad valorem tax that's through a special district. And a lot of times those are only collected in the unincorporated areas, or if they're collected inside the city, it would be done with the city's permission to do that. And then some counties split their local option sales tax with their cities based on a population formula, where the county only gets a share based on their unincorporated population, and the cities would get their share based on their incorporated population. That's not required under the law. I'm just saying in practice, that's what a lot of them have done. So they've allocated that local option sales tax, which we do still have a few counties that don't have it, but most counties do. They allocate that sometimes by population. There's some of our top expenditures. Obviously, public safety is one of our #1 expenditures at the county level. And then lastly, as far as county and cities go, we do have several things that we are periodically required to negotiate with our cities, and you may hear about some of these. One is the Service Delivery Strategy Act that requires us to negotiate with cities on what service, who's going to provide what services and where, and that has to be done at least once every 10 years. Local option sales tax renegotiations, where we have to allocate this local sales tax between counties and cities. That comes up within 2 years of every census. So next year, most of your counties and cities that have this tax will be negotiating the local option sales tax, and they have to file that distribution certificate with the State Department of Revenue before the end of next year. Failure to do so means the tax terminates, which means a property tax increase for most of your residents if this tax goes away. And then special purpose local option sales tax, which is a temporary sales tax, usually renewed every 5 to 6 years. That there's a negotiation there between counties and cities before they go out to referendum for SPLOST tax. So again, this is just a real quick overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee members have about anything that I've mentioned, or anything maybe that I haven't mentioned in regards to county government, county operations.
You do have a question, Representative Saines.
When it comes to, thank you for the presentation. When it comes to redistricting, county commissioners are included in that redistricting process. Do you all take an advisory or aid them within what they're looking to request from that process, or?
So we do educate them about the process itself that has to be followed, that you all set in state law, but we don't get involved in consulting or educating or doing anything in regards to how they should draw lines. Ultimately, you all know as legislators, you're responsible for drawing those local lines for the county commission districts. That goes through you. A lot of you all rely on your counties to give you a recommendation. Some of you want a vote of the county commission for that recommendation, but it's a process that ultimately ends here at the General Assembly. There was a legislation that we worked on It was after the last census, so it's new for this round, which requires you as legislators to basically get final approval that whatever the lines that you're looking at comply with the Voting Rights Act and get signed off by your office here at the General Assembly before we take a vote at the county level. So what used to happen is the county commissioner sometimes would vote on what their lines, and they would send it to their legislator, and you all would bring it up here and you'd find problems with it and they'd have to bring it back. That was all time consuming. And so this time around, there needs to be pre-approval. So however you go about drawing those lines, whether you use outside consultants or whether you use your state office to do it, those need to get pre-approval, and my understanding is that office is going to be looking for a legislator to ask to make that request from the state office for that pre-approval before there's local action taken.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. That was very thorough, and we really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Our next presenter is Tom Gale, with the Director of Community Government Relations with the Georgia Municipal Association. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Tom Gale, Director of Governmental Relations for the Georgia Municipal Association. And what I was dying to ask my colleague Clint Mueller is if he could tell us the one county in the state, don't say anything, Chairman Powell, the one county in the state that's named after a woman.
Hart County.
He got it right, Hart County, in Chairman Powell's district. Good afternoon. I'm planning today to cover quickly, I know you all want to try to end on time, a little bit about GMA and the reason for our existence, talk a little bit about the value of cities, the policy process that our city officials use, one of the most important policy areas that our members care about, which is revenue and finance expenditures, a little bit about home rule powers, the differences that Clint kind of touched on between cities and counties, and then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about cityhood. So I first of all want to commend Vice Chair Saines and the chair lady for convening this discussion. There was a conversation after the legislative session about the need for everyone to have more in-depth discussion of local government issues, and I can tell you, I've been with GMA for 21 years. Before that, I worked for the Senate and staffed the State and Local Government Operations Committee, but I'm still learning about city and county governments and some of the authorities and other governmental overlays that impact government. So this is a very important discussion, and I really appreciate y'all convening this group. So you can't talk about Georgia cities without talking about GMA. We were created in 1933 because of the General Assembly. The General Assembly at the time was having discussions about reining in some of the powers of city governments, and 5 mayors in 5 key cities brought together a charter to create GMA, and the rest is history. Since that time, we've morphed to become not only legislative advocacy, we do education in partnership with our friends at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. We do employee benefits, we do pension systems, we do risk management, consulting services, you name it. We're created and now exist solely to serve our cities and trying to help them, those city officials, serve their constituents. There are 537 cities in the state of Georgia, and cities are economic hubs in the state. They fuel Georgia's economy. Let me give you a few factoids about cities, and I think that these are very interesting. So if you think of the land area in Georgia, only 9.2% of the land area in Georgia, less than 10%, is within a city boundary. But 44% of the population of Georgia is in a city. 68.9% of the jobs in Georgia are located in city limits. GMA, we represent all the cities in the state, from Abbeville to Atlanta to Zebulon. And 75% of the cities in Georgia are less than 5,000 in population. 75%. So we are essentially, GMA is our predominant membership are smaller communities across the state. So cities have 61.4% of all tax-exempt properties in them. yet we're responsible for providing a variety of services to the churches, colleges, government buildings, schools, you name it. 46.5% of the assessed value of property in this state is in cities. And nearly 50% of all the industrial property in the state is in cities. And another fact that I think you all recognize, because you all came to our capital city today, on average across the state, the population of cities swells during work days 27.5% on average, due to them being economic centers. They have commuters who come in and use the roads, use the water, use the sewer, rely on police and fire protection. And so we oftentimes look at daytime population figures, but know that cities swell to serve swell to serve those daytime populations in addition to the resident populations who live there. So let me tell you just briefly about GMA's policy process. We, as the advocates who come down here representing cities, we don't make up positions. We have a robust policy process. What I like to say is it's very similar to in Alaska. They've got 2 seasons. There's winter and getting ready for winter. Well, at the GMA policy process, it's very similar. There's a legislative session and getting ready for the legislative session. As soon as the sessions end, we're hitting the road, going and telling our members not only what happened, but asking them for ideas to bring to you all at the subsequent legislative session. We then have a legislative policy council comprised of city elected officials and appointed officials across the state who take those ideas, bring them to our 6 policy committees, and our members debate them, discuss them, and approve them for consideration by our general membership at each of our annual conventions. Our annual convention just finished a couple of weeks ago in Savannah, and our policy document was approved by our general membership. And then we're getting ready again for January. So one of the key concerns of our members, and of course we touch on everything from community development, environment and natural resources, public safety, transportation, but one of the key issues for our members is always revenue and the power of taxation. So our city officials have demands of them from their constituents. Their constituents want them to pay for services. And Georgia's Constitution does give the authority of cities to cities to raise taxes based on certain scopes that are provided by state law. Clint kind of touched on some of these. Property taxes. I oftentimes will ask our city officials, how many of you, raise your hand if you like to raise property taxes, and generally I can say I've only seen that one hand out of thousands of times that's occurred. But property taxes represent about 30% of our revenue source. Sales taxes, very similar revenue source. We also have the ability to do occupational taxes, hotel motel taxes, insurance premiums, some of the other tax sources that Clint mentioned. But the 3 main sources of revenues for cities are property taxes, about 30%, sales taxes, about 30%, and then the next highest are excise taxes, like hotel motel taxes. One of the most popular taxes in this state is the Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, or SPLOST. 94% of all the SPLOST referendums across the state have been approved by local voters since 2001, 94%. SPLOST, just in the past 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, have generated $7.1 billion, billion with a B, for voter-approved capital projects. Also, as of December of 2020, 28 counties and the cities within them have gotten their voters to approve a single county T-SPLOST just for transportation. This is on top of their local SPLOST. This tax was only authorized a few years back, but local elected officials are able to sell the need for this transportation funding mechanism, and they're trusted by the voters. And then on top of that, if you add in the Transportation Investment Act counties, regions, In total, there are 92 counties and the cities within them that have an additional either regional transportation investment TIA tax or a single county tax in place. And the reason it's so important for them at the local level to be able to ask their citizens for these taxing mechanisms is because the capital needs are great and they're not going away. Aging infrastructure is in constant need of investment. GMA did a survey, and we estimate, based on the responses from our city officials, that approximately $20 billion in capital projects is needed over the next 5 years, with water and sewer being number one on that list, transportation, public safety, and government buildings in that order. So the home rule provisions of the Georgia Constitution and some home rule provisions in statute give local governments a lot of authority, and particularly municipal governments. We do enjoy the ability to have the power to do the supplementary powers that are listed in the Constitution. This is for police services, fire services, solid waste, street, water, public housing, public transportation, libraries. And the General Assembly cannot take those powers away from us, and that's a very strong provision of home rule. And it's very similar to planning and zoning power. This is another one where the Constitution gives local governments the power of planning, zoning. And the General Assembly can establish procedures for the exercise of those powers, but you can't take those powers away. Clint touched on this a little bit, the differences between cities and counties. So it wasn't until I was 5 years old that counties were given the authority to do what they're able to do today. For nearly 200 years in Georgia's history, counties were created to be administrative arms of the state. They provided the health department, they did roads and bridge maintenance, welfare, they had the court system and sheriffs, and that was it. But with the municipalization and the growth, the suburbanization of Metro Atlanta, there was a lot of pressure, primarily coming out of DeKalb County, for people who were used to city services to get city services, even though they moved to the country of DeKalb County. And in 1972, when President Jimmy Carter was governor of Georgia, Amendment 19 was placed on the ballot to give counties the ability to provide services as if they were a city. So, and I think my friend Ted mentioned this, counties and cities now can provide the same services with the same revenues to the same people, and that's why there's sometimes tensions when cityhood or annexations are proposed. So, cityhood. I know a lot of discussion has been bandied about related to cityhood. There are a lot of advantages to city government versus county government. It's smaller, it's closer to you, they're oftentimes more responsive. Just from a size standpoint, a city commissioner or a city council person is going to be closer than a county commissioner in terms of electoral influence. And there's benefits to being able to better control your zoning and the activities that the city does within their sphere of influence in your backyard, the services that they provide you. GMA, since the city of Sandy Springs was created, GMA has been neutral on any of the proposed new cities, and I'll give you one exception, two exceptions. The thought is if a new city is created by the will of this body, we'll send them the membership paperwork and try to do what we can to help them be successful. But we're not, as an organization, getting involved in the promotion of new cities. That is up to you all as members of the General Assembly and up to the communities that feel the need to bring a cityhood proposal to you all. The exemption is something that we never contemplated at GMA and within our membership until a number of years back, and many of you were in the General Assembly will remember, Eagles Landing was proposed to be created out of the city of Stockbridge. GMA did not have a policy position at that time. And so we went through a year-long process because the Eagles Landing proposal, due to the rules of this House and the rules of the Senate, it was not a one-year process, and you all were deliberative, but we at GMA had a policy process, and we worked through and had discussions about this. We had a task force created to look at the implications of creating a new city out of portions of an existing city. We ended up settling on a policy that says that GMA will oppose that type of process if something like this was proposed in the future. And let me tell you the main reason that our membership really perked up about this. During that process, we reached out to Moody's, S&P Global, some of the credit rating agencies, and we heard a lot of concern from the bond market. And just as to paraphrase, the S&P Global, they rate classes of municipal bonds in states, and they call it the institutional framework, or the IF profile. And so they'll say the institutional framework for municipal bonds in Georgia is XYZ, and they go through their methodology. They put out a statement at the time that basically said the IF profile, the institutional framework profile for cities in Georgia, could potentially be weakened should something like this move forward and become a precedent for Georgia. Another group that also does analysis of municipal bonds, the Court Street Group Weekly Municipal Perspective, they came out with a report that basically says that the implications of such an action are clear. It would provide a precedent for efforts to break up existing municipal structures and tax bases without making any provisions for the liabilities. This would introduce an extreme level of uncertainty as to the validity and the value of a general obligation pledge as security for debt, regardless of the size of the issuer involved. And they go on to basically say that it could potentially impact the municipal bond ratings, not just of the city that's being, how do I put it, cannibalized to create a new city, but it could have implications for all of the cities and raise the costs of borrowing across the state for municipal taxpayers. So I say that by, again, reminding you all, and I think Clint and Todd, my colleagues, would agree with this. City and county elected leaders really benefit from working together locally. In your communities, if they're getting along, then they're going to have a lot more successes and get a lot more accomplished than if they're working against each other. Same with GMA and ACCG. If we can work together and resolve any differences that we may have between the associations, we will benefit. And then, again, Madam Chair and members of this committee, the fact that you all are looking to learn more about city and county governments and how we can better partner with you all at the General Assembly level as partners, it's really important to continue to make Georgia a good place to live, work, play, and, of course, raise a family. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. I really appreciate your input. This is great information for all of us. Before we close our meeting, I do have a couple things I want to talk about. One is we had some requests to Zoom meetings. In the future meetings will be Zoomed. This one was scheduled when we thought it was cleared up. So in the future, we will try to include those. Representative Oliver?
The agenda says that there's going to be a discussion about the study committee, Madam Chair. Is that?
I was getting to that right now. Okay. I wanted to thank all of our speakers today. You did a wonderful job and brought us great information, and I think that will help every member of this committee. I will tell you, we kind of got into cityhood a little bit more than I expected to. it is fine that we did, because we do have 5 cities that have been requested, and they are in our committee. So it is something that is going to be a big part of our next year. That being said, the House has a special study committee on annexation and cityhood. They will be meeting in a few weeks. I don't have it confirmed yet. We are going to participate in that meeting. There's no reason for us to set a separate meeting. I think all of those things that will be discussed there are things that we need, so we will participate in that meeting. I don't have the date yet. They are still being informed. Yes, Ms. Representative Oliver?
I'm asking for direction, and you don't have to answer it today, but it could be the study committee, it could be for the whole committee, and I just asked y'all to discuss it. There is a legal issue about whether or not the City of Buckhead legislation has been filed. And I wanted the committee to be aware of that. And it is in relation to the action that the House took, voting against allowing the bill to be read the first time on the day 40 at whatever time it was. That's an issue that somebody's going to have to address, and at some point, it won't be me, it'll be somebody else. Secondly, I'm very happy with whatever decision y'all make about when we have an opportunity to discuss development authorities, whether it's in your subcommittee or the full committee. But that's an issue I hope to bring before the committee at some point convenient for the chairs.
Thank you. I will tell you, you brought that issue to my attention. That will be something for Legislative Council. That's above my discretion. So that is something Legislative Council will have to take up. If there's something legal that's been filed, that's in their hands, not our committees. But I'm very happy with the way this went today. Representative Anderson will be getting notices out when that meeting is scheduled, and I would encourage everybody to participate. And because there were requests, we will Zoom any future meetings that we have. Anything else? If nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.